Eye in the sky.
Hello?
Good afternoon. This is Lynn Wilson, your virtual host. We are
Hello?
live and recording.
Getting that secondhand, my communication was with the governor and
So we're recording now, so y'all might want to watch what you're saying.
We're gonna say good things about you, Don.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, we're good. Obviously, Jack's not here today. He was not able to make this meeting. He's in Southeast Ohio. So I'm driving the bus again today. Like last time, I appreciate your patience if I run into any curbs or anything. Roger said he'd help coach me if I get too far out of line. So we'll do the call to order and roll call.
You want Lynn to do roll call?
Okay, or you want me to?
You ask Lynn to do it.
Lynn, would you do roll call?
I sure will. One moment. Okay, so in Jack Hilbert's absence, we have Bill Wasserman. Is he available?
He's not here.
Okay.
He might be online.
I don't believe he's online yet. So, James Eklund,
Here.
Don Langley,
Here.
Clark Hamelman.
Here.
Jim Morris is absent today as well. Roger Hudson,
Here.
Frank Johns,
I'm here.
Evan Ela. Evan was going to try to be remote on WebEx today, and I don't see him online yet, but I'll keep monitoring. Harold Smethels,
Here.
Sean Tonner,
Here.
Tricia Bernhardt.
Here.
Okay. Sounds good. We need to do an approval of the minutes from the last meeting. If somebody would like to make a motion, or if there's any.
I'd like to amend the minutes.
Okay, sure.
The minutes were really sanitized a bit or stripped down. And I would like to have the minutes record what I said at the meeting. And I didn't go back and listen exactly, but I did look at my notes that I used, so this will be very close. I'd like it for to state Commissioner Smethel stated that Sterling Ranch had the only other water appeal and was absolutely required to have a conjunctive use supply of renewable, meaning source from annual runoff or the river water and Denver Basin water, and that it build out would be at a minimum of 70% renewable water supply. That Sterling had to have a complete water plan to obtain the renewable water supply and own renewable water supplies before approval. Sterling was required to prove its conservation water performance before standards were lowered below 0.4 acre-feet per home, requiring data from 5 years' experience and 100 homes before applying for adjustment. With that data, Sterling was able to reduce to 0.26 acre-feet per home, even though using about 0.2. He emphasized that there must be consistent application of the appeal approval criteria. I would like that to be added to the minutes because I believe that's very close to exactly what I said.
Any objections to that?
None.
If I may, just as a point of order, typically for county boards, including the Board of County Commissioners, we keep a modified version of action minutes. We do not try to record exactly what was said or the details of what was said. The meeting itself is recorded, and anyone who wants to know exactly what was said can always go back to those. It's fine if this body would like to make sure that those are written into the minutes. I'll leave that up to you, but I would say that as a practice, we typically do not record what people say word for word.
And I think that's a good practice. My concern was we were asked for our advice, and I wanted to make sure that it was recorded.
I think given the topic at the last meeting that I would be good if we would add those to the minutes, add your comments to the minutes.
Mandrake David or David Mandrake?
Outside of that, I move to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Lynn, Bill Wasserman has joined the meeting as Jack's alternative.
Replacement for the night.
Thank you. That's recorded. Thank you.
Okay, great. Discussion, or we're going to do member discussions at the end? Yeah, okay. Okay, so we'll move into the discussion of the draft RFP. You may have two copies in front of you. There was a first original copy that was a consolidation of the work that we'd done before, which was in some separate documents. I put that all into one document, did some light editing to make it more readable. That document was what was posted on the SharePoint. What you have today also is you've been handed a hard copy of the document that the committee worked on. The committee did meet. That was Sean, Tricia, and I, and went through the document in a lot more detail and tried to make it more coherent and try and make it, I'll say, a better RFP document. So that's the hard copy one that was handed to you today. Looks like this. Okay. So that's what we're here to see if we have. This is the way I'd look at this. We're going to try and take one more pass through this, make sure everybody feels like they're being heard. We've got everything in there that we want to get in there. And if that's the case, the intent is, and I've been talking with Katie and staff, we'll try and capture any last comments or changes that may come out of the meeting today that people want to see put into the document. Get that thing stood up maybe by Monday or so next week, Monday or Tuesday, with the intent, this is the last thing I heard from Katie, that we may be able to try and issue this thing maybe by Friday of next week. So that would be a good deal. Correct? I didn't say anything incorrect yet, did I?
Actually, I think staff is shooting to get this out by Friday of this week, depending on how this meeting
Or
goes.
this week, I'm sorry.
So sooner
you.
the better, yes.
Yes, John?
Sean Tonner. And I guess to piggyback on what Don's discussing is, the goal would be for us to have this out on the street, to be able to interview, and to hopefully select a consultant by December, so that in January we're off and running. Correct?
That's correct.
Yep.
I mean, at the end of a little bit further here, we've got a little presentation or some slides here to try and help organize the discussion. And I think the last thing on the slide is for Katie to try and walk through what she thinks the timeline is going to look like in the milepost. So, yeah, we're almost there. Tricia.
Quick question. The RFP goes out to all of the folks that we originally looked at, not just the two that gave us their approach. Is that correct?
That's correct. It'll go to the 7 respondents to the RFI. Those are the ones that would be getting the document.
Just as a point of order, it will actually go out to anyone interested in responding.
Okay.
There is no limit to who can respond.
This is Katie for staff. Just to clarify, I do believe in the RFI, we had a prerequisite that they respond to the RFI to be considered for the RFP, but we plan just to post the RFP generally.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Roger.
Nothing would make me happier than if the staff would correct the staff or clarify the staff. That would triple threat would just make me so happy. Just to help me out, because again, I'm just a lowly elected official from Castle Pines. But so process-wise here, what blessing do we need from the commissioners before we do this? And what kind of dollar figure? Does it need a dollar figure? Or is that what comes back to us before we send this out? Or how does that work?
So Katie for staff again, in working through this with the subcommittee, the attorney's office, We feel like we have enough direction from the Board of County Commissioners to issue an RFP and solicit responses. Based on those responses, this body will look at those, make a recommendation to the county commissioners. We will take all that information to the county commissioners. It'll be upon them as to what next steps we may take in terms of budget, in terms of supporting an RFP contract, and an actual execution of a contract.
Frank Johns, one question. Are we going to get costs back broken down by phase, tasks? I mean, some sort of breakdown, right?
I would expect that RFP respondents would include that. We'll make sure that that requirement is very clear.
Yeah, Harold?
I'm sorry, I'm a little confused. We had,
Harold, do you mind pulling the mic closer to you?
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Did I have to say I'm confused again?
It would be great if you would.
Are we looking at, I have RFP Draft 3 water plan that was on the computer, that I printed that, and then we
That's
have
the
the
one.
handout with the red line. Which are we working from?
RFP
okay.
Draft 3 water plan.
This is the one we're working from?
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's correct. The other one
Not
was,
confused
the other
then.
one's just there to show where we were and where we're going. So, Bill, do you have the document too?
I believe so.
Okay, all right.
Hopefully this is correct.
Okay, good.
I'll share mine.
And I do need to say, and I'm remiss because I made a joke up front, and I shouldn't have began there. I do want to thank the committee who put this together, because I do think it's a really nice document. And for us not to have found a problem with it this quickly, that never happens. So I do want to thank all that worked on it, Trish, Sean, and Don. I just think you guys did a really bang-up job here. And it really shows that you spent a lot of time on it, because it's clear, it's concise. I mean, I think it shows all the things that we talked about that we were looking for. I think you just did a really nice job at representing all of our thoughts, and that's not easy to do. So thank you for doing that. I think it looks really good. I was really bad for not starting there. So thank you for doing that.
Okay, appreciate that. Okay, you want to pull up the slides? Okay. I'm just using these slides to try and organize the discussion. We don't have to, if everybody's really happy really quickly, we don't have to try and dwell through it on the end, but this is one last look is the way I look at it. And I want to make sure everybody's heads are nodding and everybody's, pleased with what we got. So this is an outline of the way RFP 3, Draft 3 is put together. We did add this Phase 0. It turned out to be Phase 0 simply because we'd used Phase 1 and Phase 2 in all the other documents, and I didn't want to restart things and say, well, Phase 2 was Phase 1, so we're just calling it Phase 0 for the moment. That works fine. Phase 1 is the water supply and demand analysis, so that has the 4 tasks in it that we've talked about in the past. Task 1 being water supply collection information, so that's the data tabulation, that's the seeking information from all the water providers, getting a nice summary of all the water provider data that we don't have and that we'd like to have. It also includes mapping. We want them to create some maps and figures and provide us also with digital data, so we're looking to get everything in a digital file as well as in other files. The mapping will be, I'll say, more or less up to the consultants to decide how they want to do that, whether it's just simply a digital map or if they want to go ahead and combine that into the GIS maps. We'll kind of let them sort out what's the best way to do that. The reason being, I'd like them to be cost efficient, so I mean, there'd be no reason to try and put the mapping of some of this stuff into GIS if it's not going to serve us any purpose. So that's task 1. Task 2, the water demand projection analysis. If you recall, some time ago when we looked at the El Paso plan, El Paso County plan, this is what was in that plan as the gap analysis. And I think that was the first thing we actually agreed upon, that we all thought that was pretty good, pretty useful. And so that's embodied in that task 2. Task 3, which is now in the document, it was standing separately in the previous versions. That is the groundwater analysis. I think it's pretty comprehensive. I think we've got everything in there that we wanted to get in there. Based on what I heard from the presentations, I think the consultants are understanding what we're trying to get to, so feel pretty good about that section. And then task 4 is simply to try and put all that together into a final water supply and demand analysis report. Next slide. The rest of it's pretty straightforward. Phase 2, the land use policy analysis. And it pretty much stands in this document as what we've had since the very beginning. I think it's very concise. I think it's to the point. It's actually just kind of asking the questions that we'd want to ask, that you'd want to try and elicit information about what's going on with land use. And then, of course, phase 3 is the final development of the plan. Attachment A is an example now. It's not a hard requirement, but it's an example of the kind of data that we'd like to see in the water supplier survey, so that we have, what we certainly want to do is get all the water providers to use the same template. The consultants can go ahead and massage that or clean that up, make it more efficient, however they feel like they would approach that. But if they certainly if they get all the data that we say is in the example, we'll have a pretty comprehensive look at what's going on with the water suppliers. So, some of the things I think we need to try and discuss today, and we'll just kind of maybe bite these off one at a time and kind of talk through them a little bit. Public engagement. We're mostly pretty silent about how to engage the public, what kind of sessions or meetings that we want to have. We're leaving it to the consultants and their expertise, I'll say, in working with the counties and governments and the public on the best ways to approach that. And so I think, since we're pretty much silent on it, I just wanted to make sure that all the commissioners here are comfortable with that, or whether they need a better think we need to do a better definition of that. There were some comments from in the RFI process about they'd like to maybe have a little bit clearer view. The consultants would like a little bit clearer view of their role, but we didn't really do anything with that. It's basically the way it was before. So, any comments right now?
Sure. I think that, this is Tricia Bernhardt, I think that we should make it clear how many public meetings we expect the consultant to participate in and or lead and facilitate, and the schedule of when we would do those. And I would propose 3. I would propose one at the beginning to get early public engagement. I would propose one after phase 1 when we have demand and supply data and a report to give that information to the public. And I would just propose one at the final conclusion of the project. So I would propose that they cost out 3 large public meetings and prepare for those. It's my thought.
So are you thinking an open public meeting for people to come?
Yes.
Or a public meeting where the consultants come and show what we've learned so far, show what they're doing, kind of talk through the process and let
Both.
people comment to that?
Both. So it would be an open house where the consultant would facilitate, if they have information to report, would report it, then leave it open like a town hall, which nobody loves, but let people speak, have 3 minutes, ask questions, engage, and or it could be some kind of an open house where you have presentations set up and the public can come and ask experts their questions. But we need to put a little more definition in here so that the consultant can properly scope out 3 large meetings or something of that nature.
Comments? Yeah, Frank?
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think, in the current RFP, it talks about, phase 0, that they would conduct a kickoff meeting. I don't think that is a public engagement meeting. I mean, it's like this. They would come and present to us. After, probably they'd meet with the staff first with the kickoff meeting and then come and present to us. But that would be, yes, public would be here, but I don't see that as public engagement. I see that as part of project management. So that would go into that project management that we were pulling out of this RFP scope and just putting in that. So that's what I see. And I don't see that much public engagement involved in that task one until they report back. Because really what they're doing is they're compiling information. And so that would maybe be, after kind of the first engagement, the next one, number 2, would be at the end of phase one, a presentation, and then the third one would be maybe at the end of phase 2.
Yeah, Sean.
Sean Tonner, I like that timing as well. I would strongly lean towards having it more the experts presenting and having kind of a round table where they can go meet with the different experts or the experts present. I think because water, and there's so many diverse pieces of water, if we have it like a hearing where everyone's going up and giving 3 minutes, it could be really unwieldy.
I agree, it can get unwieldy, but people need to speak. We need to let the county know what their water concerns are and really try to define what their issues are, whether they're rural issues or whether they're city infrastructure issues or whatever they are. We need to understand that better.
Okay, I like that better where it's facilitated and more structured rather than open mic and just, I think it could get real unwieldy.
James, sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we did the largest civic engagement process in state history with Colorado's water plan, and that was from 2013 to 2015. And I can tell you, if we would have told people at those public forums that they had 3 minutes at the mic, it would have been an absolute disaster. and it would have been criticized as not capturing what the concerns were, and nobody would have been happy. We would have been happy about the input. We would have, and the people going to that mic would not have felt heard in being limited in that way. So we emphasized robust public outreach and stakeholder involvement, and that should be highlighted here. It's not in phase 0. The only comment that's made here is it recommends that the consultant recommend outreach and public engagement strategies and integrate those strategies into the schedule. But it goes back to Roger's initial question, which is how much money do we have to play with here? Because you can have the Cadillac of public outreach, designed by McKinsey, and it will be really nice, and everyone will feel absolutely heard. Or you can have the 3 minutes at the mic, which I don't think anybody feels heard. So it's probably something in between the two, and just directing through the RFP, whoever, the consultants to come up with public outreach strategies that are aligned with the goals we're trying to meet, and those are laid out very clearly in this document. I think that would be a good piece of direction for the phase 0 section.
Any other comments? Yeah, Bill?
So I'm a little bit new to this, but in looking at this, what I don't see, and maybe I'm wrong here, but and I've attended, not personally, but online, several of your meetings, but I don't really see a timeline. When do we expect to get the quotes in? When do we expect to have the reports? When are we going to be in phase 1, phase 2, phase 3? Are we talking about a 1-year project? Are we talking a 5-year project, a 10-year project? It's kind of, to me, it's left out kind of hanging there. I understand what we're trying to do, but I think that things like bringing in the public and all this would be laid out in a timeline, and that's where I think an emphasis should be on this thing, because it's kind of a loosey-goosey thing right now. And I realize that until we actually get a consultant who's agreed to do the project and comes in, and again, we don't even know the money. As I understand it, the commissioners are going to be the ones that are going to say yay or nay on that. I don't know if there's been an allocation of money as to how to do this. So we're kind of hanging by a skyhook, so to speak, and it just feels loosey-goosey to me.
Well, I'd like to make a couple comments. First of all, as far as do we know what the people, the citizens in the county want to see in a water plan? I don't suppose we'll know that perfectly, but certainly the county commissioners have heard, the desire from a lot of people to develop a water plan. It's been in some of the surveys before, and their action of that was to go ahead and put this water commission together to try and address those needs. So although you can always learn, right, from different people showing up, different kind of public things, I think we're on the right track and we're on a mission. I would hope that most people think we should be. And I would add, particularly since we've got a pretty strong section on the groundwater analysis. I mean, I think that's really robust. And there's a lot of groundwater in Douglas County, and there's a lot of concern with groundwater in Douglas County. What I think I heard from James was, if we did 3, if we're going to pick a number, and so we want to do 3 of those, the first one would be laying out all the strategies that we're going to use for public engagement, and do that in a public forum, and allow people to maybe comment at that time. Am I reading that correctly? Oh, he wants the mic real quick. That works too. Yeah, Frank?
That was part, Frank Johns, that was part of what's in the RFP that I said move to, the project management. It says, the kickoff meeting shall be also used to confirm and schedule the plans and all that stuff. So that's what that kickoff meeting's there for, is to really set the scope, schedule, budget, level of quality that they're going to submit in the proposals, but the kickoff meeting is when everybody comes together and agrees this is the schedule. So we really want the input of the consultants on the schedule, and that should be an evaluation criteria, I would say.
Yeah. James?
Yeah, Don, I think that's right. We need to have that initial meeting, and the consultants are going to ask what they have to spend. Like, what do we want? The Cadillac? Do we want what do we want? And then they can come up with ideas. Yeah, I mean, you can come up with, we kicked this around even in the nascent app building phase of 2015, which was nothing like it is today. But we almost created an app that would allow you to interface with the plan and allow public engagement that way. Because that's surely going to capture a ton more of your population in Douglas County that is younger than having the 3-minute at the mic thing. Because that's almost guaranteed to drive young people away from the mic.
Yeah.
Or from the process. So I think asking the consultant for their ideas in their proposals on that topic will be very helpful. We might get ideas the people around this table wouldn't have thought of. And that kickoff meeting, I think, as has been said, is an opportunity to define how much budget we're talking about using on that, which I don't think we have an answer right now. We don't know it.
We save a lot of money from consultants. If we did have the answer, we don't need a consultant. I mean, I'm hearing, I'm hearing two different views on how to handle this, and I heard it a lot when I was at the Capitol. What's going to make the residents feel really good, the citizens feel really good, and what's necessary for the consultants? Do the residents or the citizens need to feel like they've been heard, or do the consultants need input to get the job done? I would rather the RFP be what do they need to do a water plan for us that's going to be effective and efficient and not cost us a ton of money and get us a really great water plan. I would like to see them tell us what they need versus us spend several hours and lots of money to hear people feel like they've been seen and heard and not get anywhere. So I'd just like to just submit the RFP and have them tell us how much citizen input they need and be as targeted as we can for them and get the dang thing done. That's my view.
Clark Hamelman. Yeah, I kind of lean in the direction that Roger was just explaining. I think we ought to let them, I think part of our analysis of who we want to do this is the quality of experience that they have and how they see this developing and what needs to be done. I think a lot of that goes into our analysis of who we want to do this. Because we want somebody that has experience in engaging the public, knowing what's going to be effective, and recognizing the difference between those that want to use an app versus those that want to come and have 3 minutes of recorded time, for posterity.
So they can help gauge the level of effort that they might want to put forth. We could say that we would expect a minimum of, I'll say, 3 public forums, one at the end of each phase. There will be a launch meeting, which will be a public meeting, but that will be an engagement with the commission and with staff and the people that are actually going to start to do the work. There may be some push and shove on the allocation of the budget at that point in time, but the number's going to come before the kickoff meeting. So we're not going to go to the kickoff meeting and start saying, well, add this or take that out. We would have the opportunity to say more of or less of at that time, but that's kind of where that lands.
See, I think that's different, right? That's accountability to not only the commissioners, not only to us, but also to the citizens who are paying for it.
Yeah.
Having that accountability and say, hey, we don't like that. This is what we need. This is what we want. That doesn't fit. I like that a lot. And they should be accountable, especially if they promised X, Y, and Z and they delivered MOP. So, yeah, I think that works for me.
Okay. Do we have a consensus on that? Does that sound appropriate? Okay, very good.
In the words of James. I want to see the minutes next time.
Yeah. I like Jane's comments. Sean said he was going to bring a bullwhip, so I'm not sure they have the thumb.
Mr. Chairman, one of the
Yes.
concerns I have as we go through this, and I don't want to lose sight of it, and I wish Evan and Jim were here, but I'm concerned some of the smaller water districts, how many do we have? 30 or 40 water districts in the county are going to have trouble coming up with accurate information as put forth in the plan, what they need. And I think we should include either within the county or within the consultant resources to help some of these districts deal with the information requests, which really is backing into really understanding what they have or don't have. I believe that somewhere we need resources to go out, and I could be totally wrong because I don't really know, but I have a gut feeling that there's going to be some districts that will have trouble getting the information. They just haven't dealt with it.
Are you suggesting we solve a problem that's not?
Right. I'm sorry?
And are you suggesting we solve a problem or address a problem that's not been brought to our attention yet?
Well, I think when we go out for information, we'll have some districts struggling, and I just think there needs to be a resource to work with them.
I definitely think we should be nimble to that, but it's not been raised yet.
Pardon?
I agree with you that we should stay nimble to a problem, any problem that could be raised, but that's not been raised yet. Right?
Frank?
We would have to have funds for change orders. That would be a change, that would be a change order. I mean, that's, you know, they're going to make assumptions that they're going to be able to get data in their proposal, and if they can't get the data, then that's a change order.
So is that consistent with, is that consistent with county procurement policies, or is there funds that could be allocated for the project, but or could be dedicated to the project but not yet allocated to task? Is that something that can be built in? I'm asking staff.
I'm sure you do it for construction projects.
I would say it is possible when we go to the commissioners with the choice to ask that there be contingency money made available within the contract. If not, it is still possible, even if that does not happen, to go to the commissioners for an amendment to the contract to add that.
This is Sean Tonner. Yeah, absolutely. I think as long as they're aware that this may come to light through the process so that they're not blindsided, I think that's, yeah.
Yeah, and we can do that, right? We can sure do that. Okay. Next, no, we haven't done water supply study yet. But I'm going to put a check mark by public engagement. Is that okay? Yeah, so, I mean,
Don?
yes,
I just want to comment on that. I think we need to be aware that, you know, getting the last 1 or 2% of the total data in the county gets to be very, very expensive. And at some point, we have to make a judgment as to what the proper balance is by how much we lose by not having 100% of the data versus, 95%. So.
I think that's something that our consultants would.
Should have experience.
Yeah, the consultant should come up and say, we've got 92% or whatever it is, and to get the last 8% is going to cost X, Y, Z. So we think we can go with this amount of data and go with it. Statistically, it'll probably be all right.
Close enough.
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, I think what we'll see with a lot of the smaller districts is you ask them to project their growth, and they're going to go, yeah, I don't have much, or so. But I think that's a good way to handle it. We'll be sure and address the need for some contingency or potential amendments when we go to the county commissioners, so we won't surprise anybody. And then if we encounter that situation, we'll be prepared to handle it. So, okay. Water supply study. The only things I really wanted to touch here. I mentioned earlier that the profiling's in there. We're going to ask for a lot of information. We're going to get what we're going to get, but I also think that the consultants have a lot of resources, a lot of sources of data from jobs they've done, databases maybe they've used, other projects. South Metro's doing a lot of work, so I think the profiling will work out pretty good. We're asking to present that in some mapping functions. The gap analysis in there, the groundwater's in there. So this is, my point here is this is just a double check again, one more time, that everything based on what you've seen so far and everything that you've read, that the water supply study looks adequate and we're good to go with that. Frank?
Yeah, a couple comments. Frank Johns. It talks about current 2050 and full build out, and then we have bullets that say current 2030, 2040, 2050. So just make those consistent.
So I'm glad you brought that up. That was something a little bit further down the list, but we have done it. We have done it two ways. In the water supply study, we had a lot of discussions and landed on what we wanted to see in the water supply study was on a decade basis, 2030, 24, 2050. Those are the 3 dates that we landed on. We talked about that quite a bit, but in the land use study, we said we want to see, what's going on right now, the existing development plans, 2050 was the second date, and then build out. And in my thinking, trying to, you'd say, well, why don't we just make them the same? But I think in land use world, I'm not so sure, this clean 2020, 2030, 2040 is something that we really need to get the view, to get the picture of what we see for land development, first of all. And second, the gap analysis, intrinsic in the gap analysis in those forecasts are the built-in demand or the built-in growth forecasts that the water suppliers are using. So in a sense, we'll kind of see it there. We're going to see how they want to grow. That's going to tell us one thing. The task will be for the consultant to find a nice way, or a good way, I'll say, to overlay the two and try and map them out, because in the end, what we want to see is, are there problems coming that are going to be very big problems, or the problems that look manageable? Do we have a good track or not? So in the overlay process, which would happen in phase 3, I think that could be addressed. But I think it's good to talk about that and make sure everybody would be comfortable with that approach or not.
This is Frank again. It's just the first sentence of that task 2 under phase 1 mentions just the 3 periods, and then we talk about the others later. So just be consistent.
Yeah. You flagged that in your comments, so I've got that.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And we'll get that corrected.
And then the other thing I commented on the gap analysis is until we finish phase 2, which is the land use planning, we don't know what the gap analysis is. So I just said, let's call it preliminary, and then we'll update it once we get through the land use planning. Because right now, for that first one, we're going to be talking with the different water suppliers, and they're going to kind of help us understand their gap analysis versus the rest of the county, which we have no idea, until we finish that next phase, what's the plans for that development? And that's going to give us more gap analysis. So that's kind of finalizing the gap analysis after that land use planning phase.
Yeah. Can I make a comment real quick first? Got those comments, so I can get those worked into the document. The one part that is apparently missing is the gap analysis doesn't tell us anything about growth in the county outside of the water providers, right? So it's that number, the consultant's going to have to, I think I use the terms whatever means possible to try and project what the growth is outside of the water districts, and then factor that in. That'd come in the final task, kind of to add that in with the demand analysis that we have from the consultants. I think the rural use is maybe 10th or 11th. If you rank top to bottom of the suppliers, it's maybe 300,000 acre feet, a number like that. So if we can get it, it's not that it's not valuable data, but we want to use whatever means possible to try and figure that out and put something in with the analysis to go with the rest of the data. So we'll have to work on that. Yeah.
I agree with what you're saying, but in terms of county policy, the most important section they're going to have will be the outside the water provider's jurisdiction. The water providers provide a check and balance on what you can do. They either have the water, they don't, or have a plan. But outside the county, it's pretty loose. I mean, do they approve another 1,000, 2,000 units on groundwater today? Do they do it? And what does that mean to the overall aquifer? Yeah. So in terms of county policy, that is the critical question I think the commissioners will have to deal with.
Yeah. And I mean, it's really the importance of the ground. This is Frank again, the importance of that groundwater analysis, right? If the groundwater analysis shows that it is a very finite resource, then it's going to impact, what that gap is. And there may be existing providers that have gaps.
Oh, yeah.
Because they assumed that groundwater was going to last for a long, long time, and all of a sudden, uh-oh, we've got a gap.
But at least the providers, you have a check and balance there.
Yes, correct.
You don't on the open county, at least that I can find.
Okay, Jim?
Thanks. So I think I'll just take a step back. How many of us know what scenario planning is? Anybody? A few people. All right. I think we need to specify that we want the consultants to be using scenario planning. Well, it's not stated in here. So what that means is this is the cone of uncertainty. So you have almost no uncertainty here because we're living it. We know exactly what's happening right now. But the further you get out from today, the more uncertainty you inject into the whole calculation. So the different scenarios, the reason you use scenario planning is because you don't know the answers to the questions you were just asking, Frank, on
Right.
supply, and you sure as heck don't know them on demand. You have guesses. If the economy is healthy and development is encouraged in this county, that looks like a plot in the cone, maybe toward the upper end of the axis of the y-axis. If you're on the lower end, it's maybe the bottom's falling out of the economy, or maybe some competitive competitor region does better selling itself than Douglas County does. So we need to account for that uncertainty. And right now, we've got it drafted as task 2. The consultant is going to produce data on demand and supply that is collected for the current year, and projected supply and demand for years 2030, 2040, and 2050 are to be provided. We don't say anything about the approach we want them to use. That needs to, I think, needs to reflect scenario planning, if that's the consensus of the group.
I would comment that in the RFI process, we did have recommendations from consultants that we consider some sort of scenario analysis. Things you think of right away are like, well, if the weather's normal, or if we have hot and dry years, if we have cold years, if we're assuming a population growth percentage and we get twice as much or half as much. I mean, those are the kinds of things you're talking about. I think we had some language in the draft at one point in time that started to address that, but you're correct, there's nothing there now.
And that actually, I totally agree with you, and that actually concerns me, because to me, it's not a water plan if there isn't with prejudice, right? With prejudice meaning that there are scenarios that you're able to go with prejudice, meaning in this year, these factors happen, and that you're able to plan with prejudice these factors. And if we change those factors, these things happen. I just assumed to be an effective water plan, it would need those things, or it doesn't help me any. How do I plan for 20, 30, 50 years out if I'm not able to put those scenarios to make those prejudicial planning water scenarios in my head or on paper or whatever? So I just assumed that was it was baked in. Is it not? And do we need to ask that? I mean, I don't need one scenario that if all things are perfect, then everything stays the same. This is what's going to happen 50 years from now.
Yeah, it's not explicitly baked in. It's perhaps baked in depending upon how the water providers are doing their demand projections. And I don't know, I'll say comprehensively how the water providers are looking at that. I think where I'm at Parker Water, it's a little bit more of a thumb in the air. I mean, we're not specifically saying, what if the population goes this way? What if the climate does this? What if it gets hotter? I mean, we're 35% renewable, so we're sensitive to some of that to a degree. Wise Water's sensitive to that to a degree. So I don't feel comfortable that we've got a good handle on that, I guess is the way I would answer that.
Because we don't live in a bubble, and I don't know what Denver's going to do. I don't know,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, that's a big factor considering, again, we don't know where the aquifer is and how that's going to work. Okay, well, is there a way, again, without going to the Cadillac of water plans, that we're able to do a better job of being able to project in with this water plan? Or is that the question we need to ask of whoever we pick?
Well, I think my view would be that we would need to craft some language to put in the RFP and ask the consultants to, you know, give us their strategies or what they think would be the best approach, knowing our goals on how to go about doing that. I mean, we did have some of them say, we think you ought to, so it's not going to surprise them, right? And kind of push it back in their direction. The Colorado Water Plan's a good example if they want to go look at that. Aurora does that. I think Denver does too. So, I mean, it's not alien, right? It's pretty known. I mean, we'll convene the subcommittee and try and craft some language if the commission so directs us.
Don, this is Clark. You know, on page 5, we kind of say that we expect them to do that. You know, I'm reading at the top of page 5, second sentence down. Consultant will facilitate meetings with the Water Commission to develop recommendations for policy considerations and to develop or study additional analysis to inform that policy. Isn't that kind of, we're asking them to give us some direction and recommendations on what kind of impacts we can have to make that scenario analysis a little more realistic? I mean, there are some things that are controllable in that scenario analysis, like how aggressively we go after conservation practices, how aggressively we go after reuse practices, how, you know, I guess those are a couple examples of things that could be done. What the county's land use policy is, what the requirements are for application approvals. Those things are, I would expect that they would have some recommendations on those. Then there are the other things, like James is talking about, that are totally uncontrollable, or maybe not totally uncontrollable, but are a lot harder to control, and that is how much development is there, you know, what are the weather patterns and so forth. So, but it looks like we're asking them here without having a big subject heading of recommendations. We're asking them for those recommendations.
You're talking about phase 3, right?
Yeah, it's this
Yeah.
phase 2, well, phase 3, the development of the plan. It's really development of the plan and recommendations.
Yeah. Yes, my comment, Mr. Chairman, would be on phase 1, when we're actually doing the data collection and plotting out. We're asking them, in fact, we're directing them under task 2 to prepare this profile for every water provider in the county. And then we get very specific about what they need to do to achieve the estimate we're asking them to produce. And that estimate seems to be directed at one number. It's not a scenario planning approach. It's, I don't need to read the whole paragraph, but it says the consultant will forecast future consumption by assuming wells currently in production will continue to produce at the current rate, which with decline curves by aquifer and by adding the anticipated consumption from future wells. Well, that's fine, but what's the number of wells, the rate at which they're pumping, and what's the demand that is going to try to be met there? And that's where I think scenario planning will help us, because we'll be able to plan for a bunch of different futures. One where everybody and their dog wants to live in Douglas County, and one on the other end of the spectrum where we kind of have more anemic growth. But having those in the data sets, I think, are pretty much required before you're going to get to phase 3 and have something that's, solid in terms of a spread of recommendations.
Yeah, I think it would fit in task 4 of the water supply analysis is where I think it would fit if we wanted to insert it. Yeah, Harold?
Well, but we're not going to come up with the scenarios and put them out there, right? We want them to look at, it's really more of a sensitivity analysis in some ways than it is a scenario analysis. Each water district has a plan of what they expect their growth to be and what they intend to do. Then if they're worth their salt, they'll have half a dozen sensitivities bounced around all over. But I think if we get into, I think what we want is the basic plan, and then it's up to the consultant to look at some type of scenario or sensitivity analysis to balance off of that, which you would expect. But I think if we get scenarios from each of the different districts and try and put them all together, it'd be a nightmare. I think you'd have so many numbers that, that you'd want, you wouldn't want to be near an open window. I think I would keep it, what's your plan, what's your base plan, and then let the consultant put scenarios or sensitivities around it. I think that's just good planning. At least that's one person.
Frank?
Frank Johns again. This is why when we first started putting this together, I said we needed to start with the groundwater analysis to figure out how much water we have, because that's where the whole scenario thing, works. How much water do we have from the groundwater, and then we need to make it up with surface water. The surface water is going to be up to each of the districts to find water rights. It's not going to be up to us. All we're going to be able to say is there's a finite amount of groundwater, so hey, you guys got to plan on more surface water. And that's really, I think, where the number of wells and all that stuff comes into being, is how much groundwater do we have? And I think we will get it the way it's written up.
So you would say no change, basically?
Yeah, I'm still going to call it a preliminary gap analysis.
Well, yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
In my thinking, if we wanted to, I'll say see the sensitivity of this at a fairly high level, at the county level, or maybe some regional levels if we decide to divide things a little bit more regionally. What we're asking is for them to, in essence, build a model of, what the production looks like based on everything that's, all the inputs they get from the suppliers, the water suppliers, and then start tweaking that model around and say, well, if the suppliers are wrong by 10%, then, your problem shows up 10 years earlier. If drought, impacts renewable water supplies by, droughts probably one of the biggest things, right? If that impacts, renewable water supplies, then that's going to have this kind of an impact. If the population grows 10% faster than we think it is, then that's going to move the demand. It's going to bring it forward, right? It's going to bring it into the earlier years instead of the later years. So, I think it's fair to ask them to look at recommending some scenario modeling for us, and try and maybe center that in task 4 if that seems like the right place to put it, as at least the first cut at it. But then I think it comes down, when you start to get to phase 3 and you're really trying to overlay and put everything together, that's where the final modeling would be. And that's going to be a risk analysis, right? That's just basically what that's going to do for us. It's going to be a risk analysis that says, we think this is soft, or we think this is okay, or given these conditions, it's going to look pretty bad. Is that again?
I'd recommend putting it in task 4 scenario,
Okay.
and at least a reference to scenario planning.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll work on some words for that, and we can send that out or post that. Would that be the way to do it, so for them to get one last look at it?
I think the hope would be to get some commission direction and trust in finalizing it, and then we can just move with posting it.
So we can get it out by Friday.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So the commission will trust the subcommittee to,
absolutely.
I personally don't need to see that again. If you're putting in one additional line with that, honestly, I'm good with the
okay,
sentence.
I mean, I'm
Same,
fine with that.
yeah.
We're good
Yeah.
with that way? Okay.
2 sentences, no. 1 sentence, I'm okay with.
Might grow to 4. Let's see, right there. Let's, not slide ladies, existing 2050. And we're okay with the land use analysis being the 3 milestones rather than the decades? I wanted to confirm that we're agreed to that, and we'll figure out how to overlay it. We don't want to try and make the land use analysis do the 2030, 2040, 2050. We're good with existing 2050 and build out.
No, I think I would try and, we're supposed to go with a 2050 plan, I think I would have estimates and growth over those decades. I think that makes a lot of sense, because that shows you where your gap is and what your urgency is.
So you think they should match?
This is Frank, we may have it for each of the water districts. I mean, they're going to be able to provide it better, but it's
Yeah.
what's the rest of the county? That's going to be tougher.
Well,
you know.
let's go back to maybe there'd be something in between, but I think we should hold to a decade approach, because water is done in increments and over time. And, you know, it's the old theory, you can drown in 6 inches of water average. And I think the further we get away from the discipline of what we expect over particularly the next 2 decades, we ought to be pretty close to that, absent a black swan event. So I think I would leave that in there, and 10, 20, 30, to 2050, that was our job, and I think we should show how we get there. And then if we have a gap in between, I think we stand a better chance of sore thumbing it at that point.
Okay.
The bigger this is Frank, the bigger question on the land use policy is, it kind of talks about us helping establish the policy and things. I mean, you know, we're going to need to rely on the planning department heavily in terms of what's existing and what they see going on. I mean, we don't have the data, the consultant's not going to have the data. In the presentations, they both, Forsgren and Intera, talked about the importance. Intera actually said the whole land use policy and planning should be the first task, so we know what's going to happen, because we can't determine what water use is going to be until we know what land's going to be used. But so that, I mean, that was pretty weak in terms of, you know, what we're asking for in the current scope of work. I mean,
I guess my comment would be that the demand projections, I mean, the premise is that the water providers are doing demand projections based on growth analysis and land use analysis. So there's a big core that should get captured in that demand analysis. The hard part we've already talked about is the rural development.
Right. There's an awful lot of land in Douglas County that is not in a water district.
Right.
Good 12,000 individual wells, so a lot of land.
Right. And I think we kind of circled back around to that, where we're going to lay it on the consultants to use whatever means possible, and that's going to be interviewing, I suppose, county staff and looking at all the records they can find, any developments that have been filed, and try and put a number to that. And then to James' point, then we're going to have to put some uncertainty on it, and run it, you know, with 10%, 15, 20% growth, whatever that might be. I don't know any other way to get at that, right? To get at what those rural development numbers are going to be. It's kind of just up there in the air. That's the uncertainty that you try and tackle with this scenario.
yeah, under Phase 2 land use policy analysis, that first sentence, we're going to do the analysis, but then it says, and assist in developing draft land use policies. And then there is no scope of work. What's the detail of developing draft land use policies? Do we really want to come up with that, or, I mean, that came up at our last, meeting, because that's really what it was. It was land use policies that we were debating here. And is that something we're supposed to come up with? And then how do we expand on that?
I think that's the job of the Water Commission, myself, to work
To help
for the land use policy recommendations, and I would look for the consultant to give us observations and findings,
Okay.
things they see that can, help lead us, but it's
So
going to
that
let,
would not be in their scope of work. It would be, they would give us input from what they're doing, that then we can develop that.
So Sean Tonner, the way I read it and the way I understood it is the consultant will be giving us recommendations. I mean, I think when we interview a consultant, one of the things is, what's your experience on land use policies, best practices in the arid west, those type of things. And then look at our land use policies and see, hey, one recommendation would be to change this to this or tweak this, and bring that to the commission in our water plan that then gets forwarded up to the commissioners and maybe pushed down to the planning commission. Where it goes from there, who knows, but yeah.
Okay.
Harold. Oh,
No, you
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead, please.
James.
Okay, so I think you keep your sentence in phase 2 that Frank just referenced, and you add in that integrates with the water supply, with the water plan. So you want to make sure that your land use planning is integrated with your water plan. That's the point of having anything in here about land use. And that's what the consultant would be directed to do. Does that make sense?
A lot of the land use will be a result of the work, particularly in the groundwater. That's where it's going to come. So until you have a groundwater analysis, and I come back, and that's why it needs to be in as close as we can in short intervals. I was thinking about it. Every water district of any size that has municipal bonds out there does have those plans by year, much less decade, of how that comes together. So that data should be available. And then the result will be what the land use should be, depending on what we anticipate the aquifer to be. Think of Arapahoe County. The land use plan is they drew a line because they had wells going dry.
They did. Okay, so I didn't hear any changes to that section at the moment. The 2030, 2040.
No, he added that
I'm sorry.
first.
Sorry, I just said at the end of the first sentence under phase 2,
Okay.
you just add that integrates with the water plan or with this water plan.
Got you. Now I understand. Thank you.
Yeah. So land use policies is such things as how much water is used per single family equivalent, correct? Is what we would provide input on.
Yeah.
Say that again. I'm not with you, Frank. But we would provide input on what?
Well, right now, the land use policy says 0.75 acre feet per single family equivalent. We all know that's wrong, maybe not all of us. But that hasn't been a level of use since 1990, and it's much lower. But we need to come up with that, and then how much groundwater can be used applied to that or whatever.
Sure. And is it
Yeah.
a 300-year supply or a?
Yep.
It's a
Those are the
multivariate
sorts of,
analysis.
I'm just saying, those are the sorts of things
Yeah.
where we would have input into the land use policy. We wouldn't say you have to have X acres of open space. That's not us.
I would agree that, in my view, that comes to the commission, right? That the job, our job has just begun when the plan starts to get done, right? I mean, I really sincerely believe that the plan's done. I mean, we don't close the book and we go away for a year. I think that really launches us into a position of trying to start to analyze policy, look at policy, make policy recommendations to the Board of County Commissioners that we think are appropriate. The water plan itself becomes a nice guiding document and a lot of data and a lot of analysis. And of course, what will come with that, I hope, are good observations and fact-finding by the consultants to help us with that task. So kind of how I would see that. So I'm pretty much okay with the way it is. Yeah, Harold.
With the, unless there's other modifications, I think this is pretty well done.
Yeah.
And I think time is not our friend. I think, let us know when you're ready for a motion. Do we take this out? Make the changes we've discussed and what came up with and go.
So this is kind of like when salespeople, when they learn that when the customer says yes, you shut up.
Something like that, yeah. You got the order, quit selling.
Is this your last slide?
It certainly is. Make that decision right now.
I'll make the motion to move forward with the recommended changes to staff.
Second.
I'd like to amend that, in addition to what we talked about, that you would make the suggested changes that we've discussed here that were accepted to the group. With those, I would go ahead with that.
Okay. So the motion is to go ahead and
With the accepted changes that
recommend
we've all
a plan
agreed to.
with the discussion, with the
Right.
changes that we've discussed here today.
Yes.
And the trust of the subcommittee to
And
try
we
and
trust
get-
the subcommittee. That needs to be added.
To try and get that.
Yes.
We'll see it one more time?
No.
No,
No.
Goes out Friday.
I think we're voting to fire, we're clearing to fire.
I don't, quite honestly, I don't think we can hide it from them, right?
No, but it's fine to go out and we're going to get recommendations in the proposals anyway.
Yeah.
And decide on that in the
It's just
interview,
like
so.
Washington DC, you vote on it before you've read it, right?
Well, that's anyway.
We've read it.
So
Okay.
that's my amendment to their motion, so.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor,
I'll second it.
seconded by Harold. Amended motion on the floor, I should say. Second by Harold. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. I wished I had a gavel.
Now you have the motion.
Good work, committee.
Now you have the motion.
Pardon me?
Now you have the motion. That was the amendment. So now you have the motion.
to approve.
Oh, thank you. All right, so we've just approved the amendment. Now we'll take a vote on the motion itself as amended, as the approved amendment. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Any opposed? Nay. Okay. So we're there, huh? Wow. Amazing. Thank you very much. Thank you all for, Harold, yes.
Yeah, Harold seconded my motion. And he seconded mine too.
Yeah, let's do that. So Katie's going to give us kind of a bit of a roadmap, timeline on how we think things may go, correct?
Correct. So this is Katie for staff, and I'm going to be honest, Sean Tonner's already thrown me for a loop on this one. So the tentative schedule was to get this out by September 27th, so this Friday. I don't have anything up on the screen, just calling out dates. We would ask for any questions from potential respondents to come to us October 11th. Depending on the extent of those questions, we would ask for the commission's support for staff to work through those answers, if we need to, with the subcommittee. We would post answers October 18th. We would ask for responses to be submitted no later than November 1st. We would plan to bring all those responses to the November Water Commission meeting for review, discussion. I had not anticipated potential interviews. But Sean, I did notice that you said interviews a couple times. Bringing the RFP responses to the November Water Commission would set you up to have a recommendation to the board in December with potential execution of a contract before the end of the year, depending on commission, Board of County Commissioners discussion, direction, et cetera, and potentially starting a contract in January of 2025. But I'm all ears in terms of that tentative schedule and expectations.
Yeah, our meeting in November, by the way, is the 18th of November, because that's moved up 1 week because of Thanksgiving. So that would be an 11/18 date. Then our December meeting is also moved up a week. So there's a lot of, it's happening faster than you may appear.
And we can also make that decision at the November meeting. Once this group sees the RFP responses, they may find that there's enough information to make a recommendation. If not, then we can try to do interviews in December.
Like that.
Because those last two dates were tentative.
James?
I'm sorry.
So are we taking the approach of the proposals will come in with a bid, or are we telling them what the budget is?
We were not telling them what the budget was. We were going to ask for that input.
Okay, so they'll bid the project, basically.
That would
in
be the
their proposal.
expectation.
Yeah, and schedule.
And schedule.
And schedule. We had some preliminary schedules in the RFI. You know, this is probably maybe, 18 months, all said and done. Maybe sooner. We'll see what they bid. Yeah, Roger.
Because of the holidays, I'm just adding another scenario in there. Would this be appropriate and fine with everyone? Instead of in-person interviews, if there were final questions, since we have, I think, an idea of what we want, maybe additional questions, 1 or 2, via email with the holidays. That would be okay with me if we had just very substantive, not substantive questions, if we, as a group,
Questions
submitted
from us to the
from
consultant.
us to them, if they were minimal and not substantive, versus doing in-person interviews and having them haul their butt down here during Christmas, if it meant us getting to the finish line quicker, faster.
Katie, correct me if I'm wrong, Chris Pratt with staff. I think that would be something feasible that we could do if it's worked through staff. Staff could
Yes, we
compile
would not
all
do
of your
it.
questions, staff would give those to them.
Correct.
Staff would get their answers, give those to you, and then you all could decide, okay, we need to pull them in for an interview, or, no, I've
This
got all
was
the
fine.
answers I need.
Right. As if interviews, especially during Christmas, would delay the process.
Yeah, that would be hard.
Sean Tonner,
Yeah,
I like that scenario. I think we knock it out, yeah.
Any other comments on the RFP? When it's all said and done, nothing left to say or do, right? So we're to the last agenda item, which is member discussion.
No, mine's going to take longer.
Okay, mine's easy. In terms of looking at the roster of members on the Water Commission, there are 4 members who have terms that expire in January 2025. What does that mean? Do those members reapply? Are those members just terminated? In terms of looking at the schedule for members that are expired, what does that mean?
So this is Katie for staff. Staff's already reached out to those members to inquire if they would like to be reappointed. We provide that input to our county manager's office, who manages that process, the volunteers for all the boards and commissions. And then if the board chooses to reappoint those members, they can. Otherwise, they might ask for applications for new members.
So you're saying this is a process that has happened or will happen?
Will happen.
Will happen.
Staff has reached out to those members that are expiring terms
Okay.
in January.
And
It
that
has started.
process will start when? When will you start reaching out to those members?
I did.
You have reached. Well, I'm one of those that expires and nobody has reached out to me.
Okay, let me check the roster.
Okay, thank you.
So apologies if that hasn't happened.
Okay, thank you.
Frank?
And yeah, Sean as well, Don as well, Harold as well.
I did get a response.
You did?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah, I had an email. This email was from you, wasn't it?
It was for me.
Yeah, it was from Katie. So we'll double check that, right?
So at our August 26th meeting, when it was decided that, no, we were not going to take an official action on the Pine Canyon, and people were going to express their opinions, I told Chris that I was going to join online and leave the meeting because there wasn't going to be debate, vote, and all that stuff. 2 days later, 2 commissioners, the third was not present, at the Comms and Admin meeting voted that I should be removed from the Water Commission because I left the meeting in an unprofessional, childish, and petulant manner. As you can see from the meeting minutes today, the meeting minutes that we approved said what happened. There was a wreck and a fire at Ridgegate. There were thousands of people trying to figure out how to get home, and all of a sudden they lost connection. Jack Hilbert saw that I was connected to the meeting. That's why he asked for comments for other commissioners but I couldn't hear, I couldn't talk, and then it dropped off. Anyway, I think that's been straightened out. They could not use that comms and admin meeting to remove me, so they put it on the business agenda for September 10th. We started the hearing, and because that whole business meeting was running long into the planning meeting, they said we're going to continue it at the business meeting on September 24th. Well, last week they decided that they can add or remove us during comms and admin meetings. So now, tomorrow morning at the comms and admin meeting, they're again going to have this motion and discuss it, and guess what? The public is no longer invited. There were people there who were going to speak on my behalf. Guess what? They can't speak on my behalf. So the other reasons that he gave for removing me, besides leaving that meeting, George Teal, excuse me, Commissioner Teal, were that there are other water commissioners that have commented that I do not share the spirit of the Water Commission. So I don't know if that is like his other comment and totally false, or if there's people here that have told Commissioner Teal that I should be removed. And if that's the case, that's fine, but we should not act as a water commission that way. We should not be going and saying, I don't like James, get him off the commission. We should be talking to the chair and letting the chair know and let the chair. We should be working as a commission, not a small group. The other reason in the business meeting that he gave is because I hadn't read the bylaws. And as you know, on the August 26th meeting, we were debating whether we should even, have a motion or take part in this. And we decided that we would each give individual opinions. Tricia did say it met that one of the two. One was the water plan, the other one is to provide additional input. I would dispute that what we are being asked to do falls outside of that, but does anybody else feel that I don't understand the bylaws? Anyway, we'll find out tomorrow. I've got all sorts of documents related to water plans and things like that, that if I get removed tomorrow, I'm going to be meeting with my alternate, Mickey Conway, and I will pass those items on to Mickey. But I just wanted to let you know that it may happen. This may be my last meeting. Some people had sent in emails supporting me. I don't know now that it's no longer a business meeting, if those even are relevant.
Okay.
So that's it.
Any other comments? Tricia?
Tricia Bernhardt, for what it's worth, I think we all have the right to have an opinion, and I don't think it's right to remove somebody because they have a different opinion. So I concur that you should stay on the commission. You are entitled to your opinion.
Thank you.
And this is Katie for staff. Tricia, just FYI, I was able to check appointments, and you're actually term limited in January of 2026. And then as staff, public comments are always welcome to the BOCC email, bocc@douglas.co.us.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else have comments they'd like to make tonight? Roger?
Just because I can't help myself. I brought that forward. And I don't think it's a secret that I'm friends with all the commissioners, have been at different times. Apparently, one of the commissioners doesn't think that they can work with me. That was posted on Facebook, but I think I have a good relationship with all of them. But it's not a secret that she sometimes doesn't have a good relationship working with other people. But I seem to have a good relationship working with her. I interpret those bylaws a little differently than George and Abe do. Abe in that meeting also said that the Water Commission has, I won't say jurisdiction, I'm going to make my own, and I'm going to misquote him, I'm sure here, but has purview, whatever. We have oversight over anything that touches water in Douglas County. To me, that is vast, and that takes interpretation. And that was the reason I brought it up, and that's the reason I had questions about it. And that's why when he said, and I've had this conversation with him since, that he was taking responsibility for that, I withdrew the motion. How they are commissioners, and they created the board, the commission, they made the appointments, how they controlled those appointments are up to them. And how they conduct those, I hope, and since I have worked with all three of them, I believe them to be of integrity, and I hope they continue to conduct themselves just that way. I'm grateful for their friendship and hope that they will continue to serve the people of Douglas County just exactly as they have always treated me, which is just that way. I do believe that the interpretation of the bylaws need to be much more clear, and the process needs to be much more clear. I believe if we're going to make recommendations, those recommendations don't need to go to the commissioners, but to the Planning and Zoning Commission. We stepped out in front of them as a side recommendation. I don't think that's appropriate. But again, that's my opinion. That may not be theirs. And this is their party. They hired the catering, and we're going to dance to their music. Either you do or you don't. So I hope this works out for you tomorrow. I would love to see you stay. And that's on the record for them as well. So I appreciate all the work that you've done either way.
Thank you, Roger. Any other comments? James?
I think that's well said, Roger. I leave you guys for 5 minutes, and everything goes to hell in a handbasket. The opinions that are expressed here are not going to be agreed on by everybody, but they should be respected by everybody. And that's just kind of what you're saying, and I agree with that. I think that's imperative for a functioning board, commission, whatever, is you have to have dissent, and that has to be allowed. And just because I don't agree with you doesn't mean I don't respect your opinion and your ability to voice that opinion. And that's that's just kind of fundamental and probably usually goes without saying, but apparently needs to be said here. So I join Roger in hoping that we get to continue to hear your voice, Frank. I don't always agree with it, but I value it and I respect it. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Do we need a motion to adjourn? Motion to adjourn? No.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Look at the Colorado Borough Reclamation, Colorado map. They already have a 2023 Colorado plan. Reclamation. You guys are.
This is Katie for staff. All public comment will be directed to the Board of County Commissioners at their public meetings.
All in favor of adjournment?
Aye.
Aye. Hey, thank you again, everybody, really.